this video is part of a marathon, so it is recommended that you first watch my Jak and Daxter review before watching this one. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about Jak II, shall we? I have no idea why, but I can't remember any advertisements for Jak II. Wait, what year did it come out in? October 2003. Oh, okay. That actually explains why I didn't see anything about the game. We didn't have cable at that time. What else came out that year? Oh god, no. So since I never grew up with this series, I've only heard of Jak II's reputation from people who would mention it on YouTube. Through this secondhand information, I only knew 3 things about the game. 1, it's very different in gameplay compared to the previous game. 2, the game has a much darker story. And 3, the game was rather infamous for being challenging. Alright, well, not knowing for sure what to make of all that, I went into the game with a cautious open mind. So, let's see if Jak II is still worth playing. Why don't we start things off with that story, eh? Things begin at the end of the last game with Jak and his friends getting ready to test an ancient precursor machine. Upon activating the device, they become confronted with a large monster emerging from the portal. Jak presses a button that ends up shooting them into the portal, and while in the strange portal, Jak and Daxter end up getting separated from Samos and Kira. Falling out of the portal, the two find themselves in a city called Haven City, in which they are immediately attacked by soldiers called Crimson Guards. Daxter manages to get away, but Jak on the other hand gets arrested. For 2 years, Jak is subjected to experiments filling his system with dark eco. As it turns out, the leader of the city, Barren Praxis, was trying to create a super soldier out of Jak, to fight off these creatures called Metalheads who have been attacking the city for years. However, with the experiments going nowhere, Praxis orders his right-hand man Errol to kill Jak. Luckily, Daxter finally manages to keep his word about saving Jak, as on that night, Daxter does just that. Upon releasing Jak though, Daxter learns 2 things. 1, Jak can now talk, and 2, Jak has the ability to turn into a darker form of himself thanks to the dark eco within him. The two escape the prison and end up saving an old man and a child from some Crimson Guards. As thanks for saving them, the old man tells Jak about the Underground, which is a group of rebels who are trying to get the tyrannical ruler Barren Praxis out of power and replace him with the true heir of the city, the child that the old man watches over. From there, Jak ends up joining the Underground, helping them get some info, restoring water supplies, and halting the work of the Crimson Guards. Jak also ends up working for other people, like Crew, an extremely obese, person, to get better weapons and even to get a little bit more info about Praxis himself. This is about as far as I can go into the story without spoiling things, but with the setup itself, it's honestly not that bad. Sure, the setup is a bit confusing, like whether or not Jak and Daxter are in the future or in the past, and this is done purposely to keep you guessing. To be fair, it is explained later in the game, which we'll talk about in the spoiler section. Now, yes, the story is more mature than the previous game, which I can see creating a disconnect for those of you who enjoyed the lighthearted story from before. The story in Jak II, however, is pretty good. First off, the story is, for the most part, interesting, and does a good job at maintaining focus. Where I'd like to give the story credit the most is in its lack of ass pulls. For those of you who don't know, ass pulls are when writers just insert plot-important information without any proper setup, making the information come from nowhere for reasons, mostly just being plot. I wouldn't say that all ass pulls are bad. After all, there is a story that I genuinely love that at least has one ass pull. I still love you the most though. As long as a story doesn't solely or mostly rely on ass pulls and the story has good characters, then ass pulls can be okay. For the most part. It's a situational thing. What I'm trying to say is that ass pulls don't automatically ruin stories, but the fewer the ass pulls, the better. I will admit to being more lenient with video game stories because video games are more about their gameplay anyway, and honestly, a video game story for me just needs to be a good setup or entertaining. While I wouldn't say Jak II is amazingly written, I do want to give credit where credit is due, as many of the plot twists are, for the most part, set up, which is something that I like. I'll get more into the story later, but for now, just know that I think it's a very competent, well put together story. Let's not forget about those characters though, like Jak. Like I said earlier, Jak now talks, with his first words being about how he wants to kill Praxis. Admittedly, I wasn't too keen about this introduction of Jak talking. It made me really worried that he'd only be super serious and angry all the time. Thankfully though, he isn't like that, for the most part. Sure, he is serious and angry from time to time, but most of the time he's actually quite calm and straightforward. There are also a few moments when he's more lighthearted and even makes jokes, which are great as these ranges of emotions help make him feel like a more rounded character, especially since it's always in a consistent tone. I wouldn't say I love Jack's character in this game, but I certainly don't hate him, he's just alright. Oh boy, that means Daxter's next, so you know what that means. I actually rather like him in this game. Yeah, I know, I hated him in the first game, so why do I like him in this game? Simple. I actually find him funny in this game and much more likable. First off, to give Daxter some proper credit, he does actually save Jack and sticks by his side through all the danger, which to me shows he really does consider Jack as a friend. Plus, Daxter is still a more energetic smartass. In a story with more threatening villains and asshole side characters, Daxter ends up making things more fun. Him being a smartass to characters who are jackasses becomes completely justifiable to me, as in the previous game he was being a smartass to characters who were pretty likable or weren't doing him any wrong. Another thing that works for Daxter is that the game is now T-rated, so he can make some more vulgar and adult jokes, which for me works well for his character. Not only that, but Daxter is actually funny to me. I mean, here are just a few of my favorite moments of his.
Dancing, more macking, more women!
Surrender and die!
Excuse me, sir. Don't you mean surrender or die? Better keep us alive or I will never speak to you again! Obviously.
So yeah, I like Daxter in this game. He puts a smile on my face and I'm okay with that. There are also a lot of side characters they meet who range from to pretty likable. First off, we have Tauron, who's a member of the Underground. Personally, I don't really like him. I don't think he's bad because he does end up respecting Jack rather well, and he does care about the poorer citizens of Haven City. I just never found him interesting or all that likable. Sig, on the other hand, is a very likable Underground member. He's a more war-experienced character who likes going into battles gun blazing, which is something I find to be rather charming about him. Tess is an interesting character as well. She's an Underground member who has been keeping a close eye on Crew and his connections to Praxis. She isn't too interesting in this game, but she does seem to grow a liking for Daxter. I don't quite understand this myself. I mean, yeah, she finds him funny, and I get that, but he's a fucking weasel. He's not even your species, woman! I mean, what, does he look like some kind of furry dildo to you? I just don't get this relationship. Not really huge on bestiality there myself. Ashlyn's an interesting character who starts off rather hostile towards Jack, but becomes more open-minded when he starts to prove himself. That, however, is as far as I can go with her character without touching spoilers. Lastly, I want to mention Onin and her interpreter. Onin is an old mute woman who knows much of the Precursor legends. And then there's Pecker. Yes, that is in fact his name, and I rather like him too. He's a half-monkey, half-bird creature who interprets what Onin says. What I like about him is that he really doesn't take all that mysterious woo parts all that seriously, and often sums things up in a smart-ass comment on unnecessary lofty dialogue, which is something I found to be really fun. The villains, on the other hand, are far more intriguing compared to the villains in the previous game. I mean, there's Crew, who's such an unlikable fat ass you just can't wait to see him get fucked over. Then we have Errol, the tiny-dicked right-hand man of Barren Praxis. I hate Earl so fucking much, and not in the way you're supposed to with villains. I think he's just a shit character all around. He's not interesting in any way. He hates Jack for stupid reasons, like you're gonna have a vendetta against someone who resisted your experiments that much? And he's just constantly having insecure dick measuring contests with Jack that just feels so petty. Plus, I can only remember he even exists when revisiting the game. Outside of the game, he's completely forgettable. Metalheads, on the other hand, are these vile, destructive creatures who have been around since the Precursors, and have been at war with Haven City for many years. As an outside threat to the city, I like them. Not only do they look cool, but they really do come off as threatening creatures that would have the citizens worried. Which takes me to Barren Praxis, who is genuinely an interesting character. Praxis had been a Crimson Guard himself, and had witnessed the battle against the Metalheads firsthand. Because of this experience, he has become quite a tyrannical ruler who is willing to abuse and sacrifice citizens for what he thinks to be the greater good. Don't get me wrong, he's an awful, vile tyrant. but these extra tidbits to his backstory make him so much more of a complex villain, which is something I like a lot. Speaking of our characters here, all of them are voiced, and the voice acting is quite good. All the voice actors are pretty talented and do a great job at bringing these characters to life. If I had to pick one out that I really didn't enjoy that much, it would be Vin's voice actor, but that's mostly because I found Vin to be pretty damn annoying. Whew, now that we have that out of the way, why don't we move on to the gameplay? Jak II is an action-adventure game where you once again play as Jak. Wait, action-adventure? Yes, Jak II is quite different in gameplay in comparison to the previous game. So then, what exactly is the gameplay like anyway? I mean, action-adventure is a rather vague genre. Well, one of the new big features is Haven City. The city is a far bigger open world compared to the previous game. It feels very sandboxy as you navigate your way through the city when going to missions. Haven City is pretty cool. There are different sections of the city that feel quite different from each other, like the worn-down slums, the sandy marketplace, the open fields, and these more inner-city sections where you can see a reference to Ratchet and Clank. You know, this is a good time to mention how good this game looks. There's just so much detail to each location along with a great mix of colors. The areas outside the city look great too and each feel different from each other. Character models are pretty awesome as they're still very detailed and have some nice fluid animation to them. With that being said though, I can't really remember the music in the game very well. That's not to say it's bad, cause it's not. Most of the tracks are atmospheric and do that rather well. However, they just end up being very forgettable for me. As cool as Haven City looks, I do have some problems with it. First off, it's pretty annoying to navigate the city because it's so damn huge! Sure, you can steal a car, but fuck these vehicles. These hovercrafts have such poor controls, especially when turning. It's just awful. Oh, and then we have the Crimson Guards, who if you so much as even bump into them, all come out and start hunting your ass. You can beat up citizens and take people's vehicles right in front of them and they won't do a damn thing. It's only when you bother them personally do the guards try to kill you. So, when you're having a hard time steering an awkward hover car, chances are you're going to run into one of them or their cars. And then shit just hits the fan then. Not only that, but vehicles are just weird about taking hits. I mean, just look at this! The fuck? Oh, okay. My other problem with this city is that outside the missions, there is nothing to explore. I mean, okay, sure, you can find some hidden precursor orbs which you can also earn from challenges that are scattered throughout the city. Personally though, I hate these challenges, as they usually require you to get to a certain location in a certain amount of time, and precursor orbs are just used for unlocking secrets. To be fair, some of the secrets are kinda cool, but fuck those damn challenges. Like I said though, there's really nothing to explore. No stores to visit, houses to raid, just nothing. You can only visit certain locations and buildings if they are related to missions you have to play, which just has me confused as to why they made the game so open world to begin with. If you aren't going to take advantage of the sandbox city, then why not just make your game level based? I will give credit to the fact that there really aren't any loading screens in the game, and the city is rather immersive, which is pretty impressive. I should mention that there is one positive thing, and is something that I recommended in the last game. Jak will eventually get a hoverboard, which he can pull out easily at any time, allowing him to go faster, and even lets him hover over water. It's a pretty useful way for getting around the city if you don't like those hover cars, plus the hoverboard itself has much better controls. The hoverboard isn't used too often in missions, but when it is used, I wouldn't say it gets in the way too much. We should probably start talking about those missions, since they are the main focus of the game. You progress through the game by going to the missions, completing the mission, and then going on to the next one. Thankfully for you, there is a mini-map that will display where the next mission will be. Sure, it doesn't let you know the quickest way to get to the mission, but I'd say it's still a helpful little feature. I would say that a little over half the missions in the game are action platforming focused. Jak has the same moves as from before, like being able to roll jump, punch, spin attack, and double jump. Hold up, quick positive here. Double jumping is much more consistent this time. Also, Jak's health has been greatly improved. He can take so many hits and pick up health packs that will heal him up, and there's no more green eco crap. A new feature that is added to the game are guns. Yes, Jak is now packing heat. There are 4 different guns that are each color coded. The red gun is your shotgun, yellow is your basic rifle, blue is your machine gun, and there's a purple gun that shoots out an electrical orb that can hit multiple enemies. Guns really add a new way to play, okay, as in certain missions, you're gonna want to be smart about which gun to use and at which time in the mission. Typically, I will use the purple gun when there are multiple enemies in tight spots, the blue gun when there are enemies close by, even if the gun seems to have some shitty auto-aim, and if I'm not using the spin attack, then I will always rely on the yellow gun. Unfortunately, the game uses auto-aim with the guns, and it's okay. It works for the most part. Like I mentioned with the blue gun, it can also be pretty useless. That's why I also rely on my spin attack if I'm fighting weaker enemies. The yellow gun seems to have the best auto-aim, as well as being able to perform a move that requires no aiming at all. Yes, if you jump, then spin attack, and shoot your gun off in the air, Jak will shoot the gun off multiple times and bullets will just go flying everywhere, and I love it! It's just another reason I love the yellow gun. By killing enemies and breaking boxes, you can get some more weapon ammo as well as dark eco. You can in fact collect dark eco now, and after you've collected enough dark eco, Jak can turn into Dark Jak, who basically is a more powerful version of Jak that only lasts for a certain amount of time. You can also upgrade Dark Jak by trading in Metalhead gems you get from killing, well, Metalheads. Personally, I never use Dark Jak, mostly because it takes for fucking ever to collect enough Dark Eco to turn him into Dark Jak, so I just end up forgetting about the ability. That's kinda disappointing too, since it's the only eco mechanic in the game. I really would have liked to see them expand upon the eco powers. Oh well, I guess. Now, getting back to those missions. The missions with Jak platforming are honestly pretty damn great. Sure, the swinging poles can be rather annoying when they don't work right, but for the most part, these are the most memorable moments in the game, and I mean that in a good way, with some of my favorites being Praxis' Palace and Mars' Tomb, as both of these places have some great mix of smooth platforming and gun shooting moments. Which is weird because I was having some fun when re-recording footage for the game, since I remember being quite frustrated with it when I first played Jak II, and then the issues started to emerge. Okay, so no matter what mission you're playing, Jak II is just awful with its checkpoints. You can spend about 10 minutes on a mission just to get killed by some bullshit and die, and find yourself back at the beginning of the mission, and this is something that happens way more often than I would like. Not only that, but there are moments in these longer missions that just suck, like these awful chase sequences with Daxter. And oh boy are there some awful missions, like the one where you're being chased by Crimson Guards on narrow docks, and if you touch the water, you get hit with an instant kill shot that's fucking bullshit, or these damn inconsistent falling rocks. A problem I have with the game is that the missions are so inconsistent. I mean, in one mission, you're platforming and shooting with Jak, and then in the next mission, you're doing an awful turret section. Or in one where you're blowing up nests. Or even some missions where you're in some robot suit that moves rather awkwardly. Not only are they inconsistent in how they play, but the game's difficulty is all over the place. There's no gradual rise in the difficulty curve. It's completely sporadic, with some later missions being much easier than some earlier missions. But you know which missions suck the most? The racing missions. There are one too many racing missions in this game for me, and considering I hate racing sections in platformers to begin with, then that's no surprise. Whether it's competing in a race tournament or out in the world map where you have to race through rings, they're all fucking awful. Not only do the hover vehicles have weird controls, but there are some missions that are timed, and I don't really think I need to explain why time limits can suck. And others require you not to hit any Crimson Guards. Those uptight asses are freaking everywhere, making those missions just as bad as the ones with time limits. Every single racing mission is a mission I hate. I almost quit playing because of just how awful they got. Oh, MCB, you just hate these missions because you suck at the game. Okay, maybe. But what I hate most about these missions is that they really take away from the game's strength, which is the platforming and shooting. I just don't get why Naughty Dog puts so much focus on a mechanic that sucks so bad. With a combination of poor checkpoints and shitty racing missions, you end up seeing that mission failure screen quite a lot, as well as Jak dying, and it's just such a killjoy. The boss fights, on the other hand, I actually quite enjoyed. Sure, some of them are rather challenging and the auto-aim isn't the best, but aside from that, they're a fun challenge to me. Alright, I should start wrapping things up here, so here is a spoiler warning for those of you who don't want to be exposed to the game's ending. Click to this time now, please. Right, so it turns out Jak is in the future, even though he meets young Samos. Not only does he and Daxter find young Samos, but they find Kira and their Samos as well. Kira ends up working at a racing dome, where she starts secretly working on a machine to take them back to their own time. It's great seeing all the characters back together, as I quite enjoy Kira and Samos. However, I find the little feud that Jak and Kira end up having to be rather needless and stupid, and it's the only moment I don't like either of the characters. Speaking of characters, we also learn that Ashlyn is the daughter of Praxis, and starts off not believing Jak about her father being more corrupt. Eventually though, she does start to trust Jak, as he proves just how evil Praxis is, and becomes a good ally. I personally really didn't find her to be all that memorable of a character, but she's still good. Speaking of Praxis, it turns out that he's actually working with the Metalheads. Kind of. He makes certain eco-trade deals with the Metalheads as a way to keep them from killing everyone in the city. That's not to say he enjoys working with them though. He wants to find the lost precursor egg to use its power to kill all the Metalheads and be considered the hero of Haven City. Again, he's not a good guy, but he's a villain who has some understandable motives. Though he's not the only one looking for the power of the precursors. It turns out that the kid Jak had met at the beginning of the game is the heir of Mar, who had hid the egg away in an ancient ruin. Plus, the old man that was watching the kid is in fact the Metalhead leader in disguise. I don't mind this plot twist, cause it was kinda predictable, but I don't understand why the Metalhead leader just didn't kill the kid. It's not like you really need the kid to get the egg, you just need him to open it. Sure, he wants to feast on the last precursor, but come on, the kid is the only one who can stop the Metalheads, so just, kill the little twerp. The kid is far more of a threat than the potential power you could get from eating the last precursor. Just saying. Anyway, that's just me nitpicking the story. In the end though, Jak confronts the Metalhead leader and finds out that the kid is in fact, dun dun dun, himself! Which was so obvious. Like, seriously, who didn't see that within the first few hours of the game? It turns out that Jak is from the future, and that he and Samos traveled to the past to keep Jak safe from the Metalheads until he was strong enough to defeat them, which is exactly what current Jak does. Despite some of the confusing time travel, it's a pretty interesting story that holds up better than I remembered. The game ends with everyone celebrating at Crew's bar, and Samos hinting to some more adventures in the future. I'll admit that the last few missions are rather frustrating, but raiding the Metalhead nest to me was actually kinda cool. Plus, none of these missions are more annoying than the racing ones, so trust me, they're not the worst. So, would I recommend Jak II? Not really. Don't get me wrong. The story is good, and there are some great missions, most of them being action platforming ones with some gunplay. Jak controls fine, and like I've said, the platforming is good, and while I don't love Haven City, it's still a rather cool location. The problems are with everything else. The missions are very inconsistent in gameplay, checkpoints are vindictive assholes, and all the racing missions suck and are made even worse with hovercars that control like you're driving drunk. Because of this, I have a hard time recommending the game. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a bad game, but at the same time, I don't particularly like it either. Had the game had more platforming focused missions, or only these types of missions, and much fewer random missions, and no racing ones, then I would probably recommend the game. I still probably wouldn't like it a whole lot, but I would see the appeal much more. I get that there are people out there who love this game, and hey, you know what? Good for you. I hope you continue on loving this game. It's just not the game for me. I can appreciate what the game does well, there are just too many negatives to get in the way of really enjoying it. Jak II is such a mixed bag for me that I will certainly say it's quite a memorable game. Whether that's for better or worse depends on the player. I will never fully understand why they decided such a drastic change in the gameplay. Personally, I really would have enjoyed to see them expand upon the collectathon aspects they were going for in the previous game. But that's not to say that these changes are what made the game bad. After all, the new gameplay style does have some new potential to it. I just don't think it was utilized very well in this one. Things aren't over yet though. We still have some more Jak games to play, and I'll see you all later.